Welcome to the Deep Dive,
Emerald City Hockey's Seattle Kraken podcast.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Deep Dive, Emerald City Hockey Seattle Kraken podcast. RJ might be a little shorter this week as, the Kraken are, well, they're that object I'm poking with a stick saying, do something.
Well, there's only so much they can do at this point, Dylan.
Is there, though? Is there?
Well, I guess there are some things that they could do that we will talk about shortly later on the podcast.
I was going to say, we got lots of rumors and stuff to go over with regards to the Seattle Kraken and the things going on. Of course, we got to talk about the Firebirds and their journey right now and the significance.
They are very much doing something.
Yeah, they are doing something. They're holding up their end of this bargain, that's for sure. But of course, first got to talk about Queen Anne Beer Hall, the wonderful sponsor of this podcast. Now, RJ, last week, I had talked about how at the Moss Bay Hall location, they have brunch on the weekends now, right?
That's right.
I made a big stink about it because that very much excited me because I love brunch. Coincidence, RJ, that their last two Instagram posts have just been about the brunch since we made that podcast?
I don't know. Synergy?
Probably.
Synergy?
But also, maybe not. So if you want to see how good the brunch looks, you can head over to that Moss Bay Hall Instagram. That's the handle, by the way, Moss Bay Hall. And you can see how incredible this brunch looks. I know back-to-back weeks talking about the brunch, but, brunch is the best. So I don't feel bad about it.
Totally justified. I'm with you, Dylan.
Definitely. And then also quickly want to mention the fact that tonight, RJ, for Game 2 of the Stanley Cup Final, we will be live on patreon.com/Emerald City Hockey for our live game commentary. I can't wait to watch this because I had so much fun watching Game 1, RJ. It was maybe the tensest I've been all season watching a hockey game. like
really?
Just edge of
Were
my
you nervous
seat
for
the
your
whole
cats
time.
at all?
I wasn't nervous, but I wanted them to show up and do their thing. And I think they did their thing. It's maybe a point of contention as they were sitting at 9% on the win-o-meter. But you know what? They won 3-0, and I think they can come out and do it again.
Yeah, I mean, you put out a whole 2-minute video explaining, right, a little bit about what they were doing and how they were actually playing the way that they wanted to play. And so I know you're going to have fun breaking that down for everybody tonight, especially if they kind of get caved in on paper, but maybe come out with the win.
I'm just saying. So I think it'll be a lot of fun. And also, maybe RJ can give his thoughts on the series because you haven't yet anywhere. So I'm intrigued, but maybe that's just for Patreon members.
I have some thoughts. I will leave them for the stream.
Okay. So make sure to check that out tonight for Game 2. I believe it's at 5 o'clock Pacific time over at patreon.com/Emerald City Hockey. Now, RJ, on to the Firebirds who defeated the Milwaukee Admirals in Game 5 to go to the Calder Cup Finals for the second year in a row. Again, they've only existed 2 seasons. Calder Cup Finals both seasons. Feel like that's fairly significant as an accomplishment.
I'd say so. I mean, it's an incredible accomplishment. You just don't usually see this from a pro organization, right? Being able to, in their first 2 years of existence, go to the finals back to back. And it speaks to how well run of an organization is. I mean, we've talked about this so much on the podcast, even last week and everything. So we, won't belabor that point, but just the fact, too, that it looks like they're getting better. It's not just, okay, they're back there again, but you look at, they had the same opponent this year as they did last year in Milwaukee, and they just handled them so much more easily this year. It felt like that series, it was never really in doubt versus last year. Milwaukee wins their first couple games at home and it's more of a slog. But now the Firebirds earn a bit of a rest too, because Cleveland has actually stretched that series with Hershey in the Eastern Conference Finals out to 6 games at least. And so maybe that'll benefit the Firebirds going into the final.
Yeah, one could certainly hope so, right? Because, we've been kind of thinking all along, if the Firebirds get back there, it's most likely going to be Hershey on the other side. Would not mind if maybe that wasn't the case, but we'll see. Game 6 for that series is tonight, by the way, so we'll see if Cleveland could kind of do it. Both these next 2 games are in Hershey, so we'll see if that kind of helps the Bears close things out. But I mean, the Firebirds, they looked so good. I mean, since we talked last, right? They went up 3-0. They go to Milwaukee. They take Game 1. They're on the verge of the sweep. Milwaukee came out in that game 4. They won handedly, 7-2. It was a 7-2 game. But I said this to you at the time when that game happened. I said Coachella Valley will take game 5 pretty easy. I think this is just like Milwaukee pouring everything they have to save the sweep. Don't get embarrassed at home. Don't get swept at home in the Western Conference Finals. Like, you've had a good year. Don't let it end that way. And I feel like they kind of poured everything into that one. And then sure enough, game 5 comes along, Coachella Valley 5-1. It just kind of felt like that was what was going on there.
Yeah, and that's reassuring to me heading into the finals too, because you look at last year and I think the Firebirds relied on being at home a lot and having home ice. And I mean, you look at that series against Milwaukee where they win the first 2 games at home, but then dropped 2 out of 3 on the road. They came back home and took care of business, of course. But then in the finals against Hershey, I mean, the home team won every game of that series except for game 7. Mm-hmm. Like, that was a very home tilted series. And if the Firebirds play Hershey again, they're not going to have home ice this year. Mm-mm. And so you're going to need to win at least 1 game on the road. And so that's something that I was kind of looking for from them, is to have convincing performances on the road at a high level. And so far they have.
Yeah, I mean, they had 2 against Milwaukee. Both game 3, they won 5-2. Game 5, like I said, they won 5-1. So I take a lot of positives from that. Real quick, by the way, RJ, did you see the like pirate ship Zamboni?
I did. I even clipped the video of it, and I should have put it out there. I was just like, well, are people really going to care about this? Then I see it on like Bleacher Report and everywhere else. So I should have trusted my instincts.
Yeah. I'm not going to lie. I know the Admirals were the enemy for that series for the Firebirds. Pretty dope. Like, that was pretty cool.
That was very cool. Yeah, no, I love the pirate ship Zamboni.
Yeah, so if you haven't seen it, everybody, maybe it's probably worth searching for there. Now, I went ahead and I pulled up the history of the Calder Cup here, RJ, because I was wondering, like, how often in the AHL do teams repeat going to the Calder Cup finals, right? Because obviously it's back-to-back years for Coachella Valley. Feels like it's super significant. So I wanted to see kind of how often this happens. And maybe not. It doesn't take that long, but like, help me out if you think this counts. So the Chicago Wolves were the last team to be in Calder Cup finals. Here's the problem. It's not it's not back to back, but it's also back to back, because it's back to back, RJ, but then they had the 2 years in between that were the COVID years in which there was no Calder Cup final. So do you count that? Because technically, when it comes to just strictly Calder Cup finals, both the 2018-19 Chicago Wolves and the 2021-22 Chicago Wolves were in the Calder Cup finals, but there's like 2.5 years in between that. So, like, do we count that as back-to-back Calder Cup finals appearances? I mean, technically it was. The Calder Cup final didn't exist in the other years, but also, like, those are significantly different groups and different teams because of how much time was in between those 2 appearances. So I don't know.
I mean, I guess if they want to claim that as back-to-back Calder Cup finals appearances, I would not dispute that. I guess what we look at is just going to the Calder Cup finals in back-to-back years.
Yes. Okay. So then
phrase it that way.
Back-to-back years, we got to go back a little bit further in time to the 08-09 and 09-10 Hershey Bears as the last team to go in back-to-back
Hershey Bears
years.
again.
It's the Hershey Bears. They'd won it 2 years prior to that even, and they won both of those. So the Hershey Bears just live in the Calder Cup final, is the bottom line. Not great for news for the Firebirds, but hey, those Chicago Wolves teams last time, they lost their first appearance, came back 3 years later and won in the next appearance. That was also the only next appearance of the Calder Cup. So maybe there's something to that. I don't know.
Yeah, that's impressive in its own way. It really is. Not, don't want to take anything away from any of them. I'm just looking at that 2010 Hershey Bears team, just the future NHLers that would be on that. Yeah, that's John Carlson, Braden Holtby, Michael Neuvert. They had the whole like goalie tandem, Carl Alsner. Like, that team was stacked.
Yes, they won 3 championships in 5 years with 3 different coaches. Says
a little something about the roster.
Pretty interesting. And also, I do want to talk about this too, because like, I'm looking at, obviously, on the AHL website when they have the Calder Cup champions, and it has the teams. It has the general manager from the winning team as well as the head coach for the winning team. And the amount of NHL coaches, RJ, on this list is pretty nuts. I mean, Ryan Warsofsky, we know, might be a head coach very soon if the Sharks decide to hire him. He's one of the finalists there for that job. But then you just go back: Sheldon Keefe, Jared Bednar, Jeff Blashill, John Cooper, Bruce Boudreau, Todd McClellan. Like, it's kind of nuts how many of these guys go on to be NHL head coaches, and hopefully Dan Bylsma gets to add his name there.
Yeah, and if he does, I think that's a pretty darn good sign. If you, as you read the names on that list, those guys have had a lot of success.
Yeah, there's a lot of like,
and then there's Todd McClellan.
Yeah, there's a lot of John Tortorella. If we go back a little bit further, Barry Trotz, Barry Melrose. Let's go. Like, this is like a real. It's almost like this is a feeder system. Mike Keenan, RJ, like all the way.
How many
back.
of those guys won a? I know, but how many of those guys won a Stanley Cup before winning their Calder Cup? Has that happened before?
Oh, I bet
I'm
not.
gonna look that up once this episode's done.
That is that's a really, really good idea. That's really, really interesting. Yeah, and it same goes for the general managers too. But yeah, a lot of these coaches, and I was looking at that and I was just like, Dan Bylsma would really fit in with this list of names. Just saying. Hopefully we can make it happen. Yeah, it's going to be a tough one. It's going to be interesting because, like you said, it is on the road. So, well, unless Cleveland wins, in which case it won't be on the road. I don't know.
Yeah, then they'd have home ice.
We wanted to like break down and do like a series preview, but we just can't.
I know. Come on. I mean, do we blame Hershey or Cleveland for that? Hershey for losing or Cleveland for winning?
I mean, I kind of want Cleveland to win, so I feel like I shouldn't blame them.
Okay, well, we'll blame Hershey for that. Come on, take care of business and at least have a schedule out. Also, reason to have a schedule out so we can do a preview, right, is because I'll do one more plug for the Patreon here. We're going to be doing a live commentary for a Firebirds game that will be in the finals. We just don't know which game or when, because it could be game 3, 4, 1, 2. We don't know. So we'll let you know as soon as we know what the schedule is. But yeah, looking forward to watching along for one of those finals games with everybody.
Yes, and I'm looking forward to getting back out there to watch a Calder Cup final game in Coachella Valley, because they were a lot of fun last year, and I want to do that again. So yeah, I guess there's not too much to break down. I mean, the Firebirds kind of handled business except for the one game that Milwaukee poured their heart and souls into. So like, I don't know that there's too much to really break down from these last couple games. We did a pretty thorough breakdown of the systems and everything for Coachella Valley last week. Is there anything else on the Firebirds you wanted to talk about here, RJ?
I guess one more thing, because I'm sure people are wondering this. Shane Wright. He still hasn't come back to the team. He still hasn't played. And I really do wonder if that is just being precautionary, given that the team had won 8 playoff games in a row. They weren't in any danger of losing that Milwaukee series. There's no reason to rush him back. Again, we don't have any solid information on what that injury is and what his status is beyond just, the normal day-to-day. But I have to think it's probably a precautionary thing, given the way that Ron Francis talked about it at the Bylsma presser, or after the Bylsma presser. I think they're probably just being cautious about it. I don't have any information on this, but I would expect to see him in game 1 of the final.
I mean, I would certainly hope to see him there. Although, if it is precautionary, they haven't really been missing him.
No, they've been fine without him. And that's, it speaks to the depth of the team and just everyone that they have. But when the series is, back to 0-0, especially if it's against Hershey, you need everybody that you can have play for you.
Yeah, definitely. I was going to say, and partly why they're not missing him is because other people have been stepping up. This would be the other thing to talk about, RJ. John Hayden with a hat trick.
Oh my goodness.
To close out basically the series, the Western Conference final. And how often, I mean, we don't see hat tricks all that often that include a even strength goal, a shorthanded goal, and a power play goal. But John Hayden did it.
He did. And that's, I guess, something too that I want to make sure that everybody realizes and grasps, because it's easy to forget that, especially if you're just following the NHL and you see a guy like John Hayden come up to the NHL level, right? And he's an enforcer, right? He's kind of there to fight and he's not there to score. And you look at the numbers that he puts up. I think he's maxed out, at 5 points a season in the last 6 years in the NHL, right? He's not a scorer, but you realize just how good you have to be to even get to the very bottom end of that NHL skill level tier, right? Mm-hmm. And you go down even just one league, and John Hayden is a guy that can be a point per game player potentially, over the playoffs. He's got, 10 points in 12 games, almost a point per game player at that level. Like, these guys are still so good. So even if you talk about, oh yeah, he's a fourth liner, he's a plug, he's a tweener, career AHL or whatever, those guys are still so good at hockey and so skilled too, even if they're not guys you think of as skill guys.
Yeah, no, he's supremely skilled. I would love to see him with the Kraken next year, RJ. Even if it is just fourth line, maybe healthy scratch territory and stuff. But like, I do think he would add some size. He would add some net front go get 'em-ness to the team that I feel like they need at times. We've talked about that. I think Bilesma's going to add a lot of that, just with the way he's been coaching in Coachella Valley. But I think John Hayden could hang in that system if they played it consistently.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen he can hang in that system. We've also separately seen he can hang at the NHL level. I mean, a couple of years ago, they called him up for 7 games. He scored a couple goals in that time, which isn't even really what you're asking him to do, but he was able to do it. So I wouldn't mind seeing him as a call up for certain games where you feel like you need that extra something.
Yeah, so just wanted to give the shout out to John Hayden there, because I know a lot of people were pumped to see that from him, and I was too. It's a significant thing, especially, like I said, the way he did it. Just get a goal at almost every way you can. He was just missing a little bit out on the Mario Hattie, the 5 game. What is that called even? Does it have a name?
Yeah, scoring all 5 way. I don't know. I don't think it has a name.
It should be called the Mario.
That's the thing, because there's one player clearly associated with it, scoring in all 5 way. What, even strength, shorthanded, power play, empty net, and penalty shot, right?
Yeah.
So that's tough, because up 5-1, the other team, it's too much. They're not going to pull their goalie, and then no one's going to trip him on a breakaway for a penalty shot. He did as much as he could.
Yes. Hey, okay. Real quick, tangent time. Sorry, everybody. If you're a Red Glare listener as well as a Deep Dive listener, this should not come as a surprise.
This has more of a Red Glare feel to it, doesn't it, this week?
Yeah, I mean, because there's not too much going on.
Yeah.
If a player, RJ, there's an empty net and they, they're on a breakaway and a penalty gets taken against them, a goal is awarded, right? Like, they don't bother with the penalty shot. They just award the goal. Would that count as a penalty shot goal or as an empty net goal?
I think it counts as an empty net goal, because it's not the penalty shot doesn't happen.
Doesn't happen, yes. Although you're saying like you couldn't do the penalty shot.
Or is that a 6th way of scoring, having a goal awarded to you?
I was just gonna say, like, come on. So I don't know. Like, that would be like an interesting scenario. Could you make the argument if you were that player and you had scored all the other ways and then that one that counts for both? You scored like 4.5 ways.
I guess, yeah, I don't think you could argue it counts for both, but you could take your pick of which one.
Yeah. Just an interesting thought I had there. Thanks for humoring me. All right, so Firebirds, fantastic stuff. Do they have a schedule for the finals? I haven't seen one. I would think that they could, because they know like how late this series is over Wednesday, the Eastern Conference final. So regardless of anything. Yes,
but the problem is they don't know which team's going to have home ice. So there's potentially 2 different arena dates.
That's true. All right, that makes sense. Stop being logical. I want hockey. I want more hockey, RJ. Come on. I want more Firebirds. All right. That's I think I'm gonna do it for the Firebirds. Real quick before we get to all the great Kraken rumors and stuff going on, RJ, we have an ad for a pretty significant member of the Emerald City hockey community.
All right, so I'm excited to tell everyone about this. So a member of the ECH community is going to perform at the biggest performing arts festival in the world. So Gaby Lucas, maybe you've seen her on the Discord as Gerbsy, will be at the Edinburgh Fringe doing a comedy show called A Berkshire Boar Walks Into a Bar and Gets Shot in the Face. And you have the chance to see a preview of that show that she's going to perform. It's a stand-up show that is not, and I repeat, not, about British Columbia and Washington's silliest pig-based almost war. So with that description, right?
It's gotta be though, right? Like, come on.
You'd think so, right? Well, here's the thing. I'm told it isn't about that, but it's also not about that. So I think it might be pig war related, which, by the way, great historical incident that happened between British Columbia and Washington. But the best part, Dylan, and the best part for you, certainly, is that if around 10 ECH people show up, she will officially stop harassing you about NHL draft prospect takes. So everybody, if you
Please.
care about Dylan at all, you should
Please,
go.
everybody, do me this solid. Do me this solid. Go see the preview for the show.
Yeah, so you can help Dylan out, you can help Gaby out. This is great. And you can laugh a whole lot because it's going to be a hilarious show. So it is June 15th at 7:30 p.m. at 18th and Union Theater in Seattle. So that's the preview. And then, of course, you'll be performing at the Edinburgh Fringe too. So the link to that is 18u.thundertix.com. You can find it. And then also we will post the link for tickets and all the information that'll be in the description below on YouTube and on the podcast feed. So you can just go ahead, click on the link, go and get tickets, and hopefully save Dylan from some harassment about NHL prospect takes. Have a good time, have some laughs. Dylan, I'll give you the last word here.
I was just gonna say, if you wanna be on theme for a comedy preview, right? 9 of you will show up this Saturday to 18th and Union in Seattle. Not exactly 9 of you will go. Maybe there's a 10th, but doesn't say that you're from the ECH community, just to really get at me.
Meet up beforehand. Yeah, because the more the merrier. But just make sure that no more than 9 of you say you're with ECH.
Yes, exactly. So congrats to Gaby there, and I'm sure it's going to be a really fun preview show. All right, RJ. Now we have Kraken rumors. I am excited for this because we've like independently seen these, and we've been like, oh man, can't wait to talk about that on Deep Dive. And now it's Deep Dive time, so we actually get to talk about them. Which one are we starting with, RJ?
All right, I think let's start with Matty Beniers and
Okay.
and the potential extension coming. So David Pagnotta has reported that Matty Beniers' contract extension talks have begun. Obviously, a contract hasn't been reached yet, or we'd be talking about the contract that was agreed to. But Matty Beniers is a restricted free agent, so the Kraken have his rights. They will re-sign him. A deal will get done. There's no question about that. The questions are, what does that deal look like? Coming off of his entry-level contract, he's obviously due for a raise, but how much of one? Because, of course, he won the Calder Trophy in his rookie year, his Rookie of the Year, and then took a bit of a step back this year. And so it's going to be a very interesting contract to see what it looks like. And Pagnotta even says the negotiations are in the very early stages. So I don't know when exactly a deal will get done, but given that they are talking right now, let's discuss what that contract might look like. I know we've talked about it in the past, but let's kind of revisit it now, knowing what we do after the season, and what we think that contract might look like, because I think there's 2 options really for it. There's short-term and long-term. Both are potentially on the table. That's part of the Pagnotta report as well. But there's the long-term option of maybe a 7 or 8 year deal, trying to get him locked down long-term. And that's going to have a higher cap hit than a shorter term deal that's probably would be 3 years or so. That's what's projected. And, a shorter term deal would allow Matty Beniers to kind of bet on himself and maybe try for a higher number later. Dylan, I mean, which way are you leaning? Do you think it's going to be shorter or longer term? I certainly have my thoughts, but I got to let you get a word in here.
It's got to be a bridge deal, right? Like, it's got to be a short-term bridge deal. I don't see how, coming off a 37-point season, a player would be like, yeah, let's go ahead and lock me down at that number, basically, right? Like, at the number that you would associate with that. Unless Ron Francis is just like, he's sold and he truly believes that it was just a blip, and he's, everything's fine actually, and things can get moving forward. I just don't see how this is ever going to end up being a long-term deal.
Yeah, I agree completely. I would expect to see the 3 year term and a little less money. Gives the Kraken some more cap flexibility, which I guess is nice. They really don't need it right now. So if I'm Ron Francis, I'm really trying to see if there's any way I can get a long-term deal done. But if I'm Matty Beniers, there is no way I'm taking a long-term deal. So I think it's going to be that short-term kind of bridge deal. And what's the projections here? So from AFP Analytics on that short-term deal, on a 3 year deal, AFP Analytics projects $4.1 million cap hit on a 3 year deal. Evolving Hockey projects a little bit closer to 5, which I think is probably more realistic.
Yeah.
I think the AFP ones are, get it a little bit low for the mark. And then also, for what it's worth, for a 7 year deal, AFP Analytics has that at a $6.66 million cap hit. Whereas Evolving Hockey has a little bit higher, probably in the $7 million range. So if I'm Matty, I'm just taking one of those short-term deals, leaving a little bit of the extra money and term on the table because you got to bet on yourself.
Yeah, you do. And so I think that's the direction it's heading. Yeah, I think 5 is probably a good cap hit number.
3 times 5
Yeah, 3 times
seems
5.
about
Like
right.
that seems about right. Like I'm trying to think of like other comps, and like Zegras is in the middle of
Zegras is the first one I thought of.
yeah, is in the middle of his 3-year bridge deal, and that was 5.75 the cap hit. But Zegras was coming off of back-to-back over 60-point seasons. And so like I feel like there's a little bit more leverage there on Zegras's part. That and like all the, marketing and all that stuff that he kind of brought to things. Whereas, Maddie not quite coming off of those numbers, right? Like, 57 points season prior and then last year 37. So I feel like being a little lower than that, but also taking into account the big cap jump this year, I think about 5.
Yeah, no, I think that's about right. And also, you look at Matty does not have arbitration rights, so he doesn't have that bit of leverage that he can
Yeah.
go to as well. So that tends to keep the numbers down on contracts like this if they are bridge deals, because long-term deals, then the player has to really agree to that and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Question for you though, Dylan: if you were Matty Beniers, and this is with your own personality, we're not trying to get into his head really, but if you were Matty Beniers and Francis was really trying to get you to sign a long-term extension, because he should be. That's what Ron Francis should be trying to do. What for? Let's say I would go max term. Let's go 8 years, right?
Yeah.
What cap hit? What yearly salary would you need in order to accept that deal? Because obviously, if he offers you 8 times $9.5 million, you take that because that's the upper end of what you could have gotten even if you did really well this year, right?
Right.
You'd lock that in.
Yeah.
But where's the line for you?
I think that is the line. Like, I legit think it's like 9.5, somewhere up there, because I think even at 8.5, you got to look at it and go like, well, the cap jumps big this year, it jumps in again next year. Like my percentage of the cap just drops just existing the next 2 years. Like why do that when you could? You could just ask for a 2-year bridge deal and just come back to the table and negotiate with a much higher cap in 2 years. Like you could just do that too if you really believe in yourself. Like I would consider doing that. It would have to be 9+ for me to sign a long-term deal if I'm Matty Beniers, and I can't imagine Ron Francis offering that, given what we've seen from Matty so far.
Yeah, I agree. And at that point, I'd have to think about 9 if I were Francis, just because I think that might actually, if you believe that he can turn it around, that could be a solid savings for you. But there's a reason these kind of deals don't get done on a player where there's still question marks, right? Because that'd be a huge risk for the team at that point.
Because I still feel like that 9 number is the difference between a really, really good player and a difference maker. Right? Like in my mind, if I'm a general manager, I'm signing somebody. The way I go over 9 is because I feel like that guy is a true difference maker. Like the game changes when he steps foot on the ice. And Matty is really, really good, but I don't think he's hit difference maker level yet, or at least not consistently enough. And so that's why I would not be able to commit that if I was Ron Francis to Matty Beniers right now. Like I said, in some ways, like I've said previously, in some ways, it's not even that bad for the Kraken either, right? Go ahead and sign him to the bridge deal, kind of put that pressure on him. Either he rises to it, in which case, great, you have a difference-making player. Like, you don't care about paying him a little bit more at that point because he is what you need and want him to be. Or he kind of doesn't, and then you're not kind of stuck with that contract long term. Like, as much as it is one of those, like, you could save 2.5 million maybe cap hit wise if you were to lock him down now, I don't know that that's worth the gamble long term.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I mean, you're seeing that also kind of with the Vince Dunn deal where he signed a 4-year deal last year, right? And part of that is what we said, right? If he's after one great season, if he's not for real, you've limited the term. If he is, like when Dunn now is going to be 30 years old, you're going to really have to pay him because he actually is that good. But you know what? You have a defenseman who actually is that good,
right? At
a reasonable cap hit for the next 3 years. And for the time being, you take that. And so that's kind of where I think we're headed with Matty.
Yeah. Now, question for you, time.
Okay.
Because if I'm Matty Beniers, like I said, I'm pushing for a 2-year term. Do you think that that's possible? I mean, everyone always thinks 3-year for bridge deals. That's generally what we see, but we have seen 2-year deals done in the past. Do you think that that's something that Ron Francis would be open to, or do you think that would be a non-starter from the team perspective?
I would push hard against it, and I would push hard against it because, and I've talked about this in the Armchair GM streams too, with how the contracts are staggered for the team and everything. You have a lot of contracts up after, or key contracts up after 3 years. And so you'd like to kind of get those all together. I mean, the big one I look at is Philip Grubauer.
Mm-hmm.
His money is off the books 3 years from now. And so if you can get that 3-year extension, when you really have to potentially pay Beniers, right? You have Grubauer's money coming off the books. You have Andre Burakovsky's money coming off the books, and that should help you there, along with the cap having gone up and everything. But that's what I would look for, is a 3-year deal. And also, just given Beniers doesn't have a ton of leverage, in this situation, he's not arbitration eligible. I don't think any team's going to go around and try and offer sheet him. It's just, there's no real leverage that he has. And so but when it comes to the difference between 2 and 3 years, I think hanging in there and holding out for a 3rd year is probably something you could get done as a GM and not really bother the player too much.
Probably not, no. Especially if you were,
and I'd throw even a little extra money his way to get that 3rd year.
Especially if you were doing 5, right? Like, I feel like that's the difference. I feel like if you do 2 years, then the money is going to be like 4.5.
Yeah, or I mean,
or even
given
4.
How I would say 4 or maybe even less.
Right.
Like that's what I would need in order to sign a 2-year deal.
Yeah. So, but yeah, it's an interesting situation just because we haven't seen the Kraken in this spot really before. Like the Vince Dunn one was, I guess, like the first big example of like, okay, they have to extend somebody who's a key part of this team. But for Matty Beniers being like, the first ever draft pick, 2nd overall pick, homegrown talent, guys won the Calder Trophy, rookie year, all that kind of stuff, how much he means to the organization and the fan base, it's going to be interesting to kind of see how this goes. But I think just because of the amount of factors working against Matty Beniers right now from all sides, we'll probably just see a bridge deal done that's just reasonable, and there's not going to be too much to it.
Yeah, and I think even when the news comes out about a deal getting done, that's probably what we'll say. Just, this is reasonable. It's a bridge deal. Kind of how do they construct everything around it and what does it allow them to do? So I think that's probably what we'll see. As for the timing of it, there's no rush.
No.
There's really no rush. They have cap space to work with. They know generally what the number is going to be. Wouldn't surprise me to see it even after July 1st.
I was just going to say, I mean, the deadline is training camp, basically. There's
and
really
we see these deals often go up to around training camp too, where sometimes that can linger on, but it shouldn't be an issue here.
I don't think that would be an issue here. I mean, we did see that with the Zegras deal last year, right? Like it went into training camp, he was holding out, all that kind of stuff. I can't imagine that happens in this scenario. But yeah, I could see it definitely happening after free agency, after the draft, after free agency, all that stuff, unless both sides are really kind of on the same page, in which case maybe it gets done later today and we get hit by the deep dive curse. I don't know.
Yeah, I would take that. For this bit of news, I would take it.
I would too. What's the next rumor here, RJ?
All right. So the next rumor, this is also from David Pagnotta. Actually, he's on a roll as far as reporting kind of generally obvious things about the Kraken. There's the contract talks have started. Yeah, there's going to be a deal. And then I guess the other report too is that teams have been calling Ron Francis and asking about Shane Wright. And Ron Francis, I think rather predictably, has been telling them no, they are not going to move Shane Wright. Now, for anybody who's been listening to this podcast for a while, who's been following with the Kraken and everything, right? It makes no sense to move Shane Wright unless there's some true star player coming back, of course. But I don't think those are the kind of deals that anybody's discussing. These aren't the kind of deals, if you're another GM, you're not floating a Brady Tkachuk or somebody out there and be like, hey, would you move Shane for him? No, those are not the kind of deals that we're talking. So, Ron Francis has, it sounds like, made it clear to teams they are not going to move Shane Wright, which kind of should be clear to everybody. Mm-hmm. But we've heard a lot, though. I think it's worth bringing this up because we've heard A lot of Shane Wright's names, whether it's in armchair GM trade proposals or whether it's mock trades from around the league from various media sources. Like, we've seen his name thrown out there a lot, especially with the guy we'll talk about in a little bit later in Marty Necas, and Canes fans, media proposing maybe that Wright goes back to Carolina in an Necas trade. And I think there's just this misconception around the league for those who don't pay a lot of attention to the Kraken, which is a lot of people because West Coast, all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
That because Shane Wright is not an NHL regular, because he spent so much of the season in Coachella Valley last year, that somehow he's been a disappointment or a bust or isn't on that track that a lot of top 5 picks are, when that's just not the case. He's just had a different development track, and this was the plan for him all along because he needed that consistency after having missed all the COVID seasons and everything, right? He's very much on track. And I think that's something that people around the league don't really understand. Mm-hmm. And as a result, they're kind of throwing him in those trade proposals thinking that he could be moved, when really a Shane Wright trade would be pretty unprecedented in the cap era. And so I'll let you get a word in here, Dylan, before I talk about how unprecedented it would be.
Yeah, I mean, I am curious because that's the side of things I don't know. But I'm with you 1,000%. Like, this makes sense because normally you would look at a situation like this, like you said, and say there's something up here. Like, maybe there needs to be a change of scenery. Something's going on. But I think there's 2 factors that have made it so that isn't the case with Shane Wright specifically, and that I'm with you. People just generally aren't used to thinking about. Certainly armchair GM folks, maybe some media people that aren't paying attention, definitely aren't considering. You mentioned one, which was COVID, which was huge, especially for a guy like Shane Wright, that the year that the OHL didn't play, he didn't play. Like, he didn't go to Europe and play. He didn't go somewhere else and play. He just didn't play a full season of hockey. And that's significant at his age, right? I mean, you're talking about his 16, 17-year-old season. That's a ton of development time to miss that he missed. And so I think the idea of that maybe tacking on an extra year to, when he gets to the NHL is perfectly reasonable. You would say that for anybody that, say, had a significant injury and missed a season. Nobody would blink an eye at that. But I think just because COVID just happened for everybody just kind of wrote it off. But when you're talking about the development timeline of a prospect, it's super significant. And I think that we're seeing that with a lot of guys, both from the 21 draft and the 22 draft, that a lot of their timelines have been shifted because of them missing those seasons. And so I think that that's something that not everybody's kind of taking into account, because otherwise, he's only going to be 1 year late for like a normal top 5, 4th overall pick, right? Normally you'd see them that year after the draft, right? Not like the year they were drafted, but the season after. And we're gonna see him season 2, right? Like, that's all. I think you can account for that with the missed COVID year. The other thing that I don't think people are really accounting for is the fact that this was an expansion team under the new age of expansion rules, where you don't need to rush your prospects if you're an expansion club because you have too many NHL players, right? Like, Vegas wasn't rushing Cody Glass through the pipeline, right? Like, back when they took him 6th overall, because they didn't need to, right? Like, there was no place to put him. You didn't need to because you had too many NHL players. It's kind of the same situation with the Kraken. I think if the Kraken had been set up under the old expansion rules, or just set up like a normal team who had just been bad for a little while, picked 4th overall, gotten Shane Wright, we would have seen Shane Wright all year this year. But the Kraken had too many NHL players still left over from the new age expansion rules, and I think that also played into this. It allowed them to play it a little bit safer with him, petition, get him into the AHL, all of that kind of stuff, and take a different route that, yes, we're not used to seeing because we've only seen 2 teams operate within this set of circumstances. So I think those 2 things combined make this like a really easy to explain away thing if anybody was to take the time and explain it to a national audience. The problem is none of the national folks are looking at it that way, and none of the national folks really honestly care enough to explain it that way either.
Yeah, so let's hope some maybe are listening to this. Who knows? You never know who's listening, but this would, I think, be pretty instructive there. And yeah, I agree with what you said. Now, as far as how unprecedented a trade Shane Wright trade this summer would be, I was wondering, right? Because Shane Wright picked fourth overall by the Kraken. I mean, he was consensus first overall going into the draft year, right? But he picked fourth overall. So I was wondering how many top four picks. By the way, Shane Wright has played 16 career NHL games. Because when I think of top picks being traded, it's risky, right? I mean, the old adage, right? Don't trade a potential top pick star player right before you are absolutely sure what you have. And I think teams largely adhere to that rule. And so Shane Wright's played 16 NHL games. Not really enough to know for sure what you have. So when was the last time that a top four pick, Dylan, who had played 16 or fewer games, actually, let's bump it up to 40, who played 40 or fewer NHL games, was traded? So when was the last time a top four pick was traded before they hit 40 NHL games?
I am trying to think of trades that involved like super high picks while they were still prospects. It is not many. I mean, any that I can think of were like part of larger superstar deals, right? Like where it was really something going back the other way that was like massively significant. I don't. Has it happened in the last 14 years?
It has.
Okay, that's what I feel like.
You just got it, yeah.
Um, I don't know. I'm spacing now.
Yeah, so I wouldn't expect you to maybe know these guys off the top of your head here. So the last time,
wait, was it?
Yeah,
no, because Dubois had already played. Never mind. No.
yeah, no, it wasn't. So the last time that a top four pick was traded before his 40th NHL game was Griffin Reinhart.
Oh,
He was drafted in 2012.
yeah.
So 12 years ago, right?
Yeah.
It was when he was drafted anyway, and he had played 8 NHL games for the New York Islanders, who had drafted him before they traded him to the Edmonton Oilers. But at that point, he was I mean, it was a few years after his draft year, right?
Yeah.
Kind of a bust. That's the way he was trending. And so that's the kind of situation that you will usually see when a top four pick is traded. And of course, Shane Wright is just not on that track at all. Reinhart, by the way, would go on to play 37 career NHL games. So, not much of an NHL career for him. So that was the last time that's happened. Last time before that was Thomas Hickey. Remember him?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the LA Kings drafted him, I believe, fourth overall, and then ended up trading him before he played an NHL game. But at that point, he had spent 5 seasons with the Manchester Monarchs, their AHL team, and couldn't really break through to the NHL at that point.
Yeah.
And now he did go on to have a somewhat productive career for the New York Islanders, who the Kings traded him to, but still not really the Shane Wright path here, right? Hasn't spent 5 years in the AHL and been unable to crack the NHL roster. So also those are two defensemen, and the D, development track can be a little bit different.
Yeah.
The last forward who was a top 4 pick and was traded before his 40th NHL game?
No.
I wouldn't expect you to get this name because he was drafted in 1999, and it's Pavel Brendel.
Whoa.
Yeah, drafted by the New York Rangers in 1999. He was traded before he had played an NHL game. And maybe this is a little more comparable because he was traded for Eric Lindros.
Yeah. See, that's the stuff I was thinking is like, it's the Lindros style trades that stuff happens. Yeah. I'm looking back at the Griffin Reinhart situation, and yes, I mean, he played 2 more years in junior, then basically a full season at the AHL, and that's when the Islanders were like, okay, it's been 3 training camps and he hasn't been able to make this team. Maybe there's not something here. And also to add to that, by the way, the Oilers were also this is the time where the Oilers were desperate for defensemen. Like, this is very much the era where the Oilers were taking flyers on every defenseman possible. And I think that's also partly why you see that trade happen there. But yes, I'm very familiar with Griffin Reinhart, of course, member of those Edmonton Oil Kings teams that kept the Winterhawks from going on to Memorial Cups while I was with them.
Well, I'm sure nobody
Griffin
around
Reinhardt,
here is all
Tristan
that sad
Jarry,
about that.
Curtis Lazar.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah. So the last time you can point to really a comparable trade with a player like that was a guy drafted in 1999. The trade happened in 2001.
Right.
So we're talking 23 years ago. And so players like this at this stage of their career just are not traded. These trades do not happen. It takes something exceptional to make a trade like this happen. And really, it hasn't happened in the cap era. And so anybody speculating about maybe a Shane Wright trade shouldn't be surprised to see that Ron Francis is saying no to people who are asking. And it just doesn't make sense for the Kraken, or really, as you've seen through history, for any team to do it.
Yeah, it's still so strange to me, and I do wonder if any of this would be happening if Shane Wright wasn't an exceptional status kid, right? If he had not carried that weight from being exceptional status at the OHL and then gone on to this level, because like you think about how long it takes prospects to get to the NHL normally, and again, it's not crazy for guys taking this high to not be there yet, or not in a substantial way. You know what I mean? Like that's not nuts. Like there's still a significant amount of the guys from the first round in 2021, the draft prior, that haven't gotten there. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
Because like that's just part of it. Like it's normal. So I don't know. I still think it's very, very strange that so many people are doing this. I mean, I'm looking at it, and I mean, is this over half or about half of the first round from the draft Shane Wright was drafted in have not played at the NHL level yet? Well, I don't.
Yeah, I mean, you're just going to see that with players of that year. I think, I don't know. I think part of what it is that, you'll always see trade proposals, especially from fans in certain markets or bigger markets, right? It'll just throw in, top untouchable prospects for their, mid-range guys. Because that's just, you overvalue your own players, you undervalue other teams' players, and that's how it goes. But you are seeing him included in trade proposals from pretty big outlets too. That's the difference that I'm seeing.
Yeah. And like I said, I think that's because they know his name is known, right? People know Shane Wright because he was the presumed first overall pick, because he was an exceptional status kid, because he had the junior acolytes and all that stuff. But like I look at it, Cutter Gauthier has played one game at the NHL level. He was picked one pick after Shane Wright. Now, I guess I can't say that nobody's including him in trade proposals because he has been traded.
Yeah. And so I was looking too at other examples too, because there are a couple like when you get to like top 10 picks, because obviously everyone might bring up Cutter Gauthier, literally the pick right after him who has been traded. But that was a situation where the player clearly did not want to play for the organization.
Right.
And that's that's all that was. Yeah. And it's clearly not the situation here.
Right. But again, like, it's all pretty easily explained stuff when you factor in COVID, when you factor in the state of the Kraken roster. I mean, they petitioned to have him play a full season at the AHL level. They won that petition. He played there. He looked fantastic. He outplayed a lot of guys that were older prospects than him. I don't know. I think a lot of it is just, it's just the name recognition and stuff. And then from the actual NHL general managers making the call on him, that I would always take as a positive, because that's clearly a sign of they watched his NHL tape, they've watched his AHL tape, and they think that he's on the verge of a breakout. Because otherwise, why would you trade for a guy that you would think is a bust?
Exactly.
That
you
guy
have
looks
to
like
believe
a bust.
in someone like that.
Yeah, he's not at the NHL level yet. Let's go try to trade for him. Maybe we can fix him. Right? The infamous "we could fix him" argument. No, you don't have multiple teams being like, "We can fix him." Maybe they're telling you that if you're Ron Francis because they want him, but that's because they're all looking at him and going like, no, the dude looked really legit in that NHL tape that we saw from him in those handful of games. He's looked good all year in Coachella Valley. This is a guy that maybe they're disappointed because he's not there yet, and we can sneak in and grab. And
right. And as an NHL GM too, that's part of your job, is to be told no.
Yes.
You need to ask. You need to be told no. If you're not asking, you're not doing your job.
Right.
And so they know everything that we just talked about, how unprecedented this trade would be. But you got to ask. That's your job.
Yep. So, it's interesting. It's a little unsurprising, but I think mostly it's the one thing about it that's been frustrating has just been like all the larger media outlets kind of jumping on board with this idea without really doing their homework. So shame on them.
Yep. Well, hopefully this report helps with that.
Maybe.
Not holding my breath.
I'm not either. We'll see. Okay, and then there's one more rumor to talk about, right?
Yes. So going from Shane Wright to a player that he's been involved in some of these trade proposals for, someone that I've seen on the other end of a lot of proposed Shane Wright trades that will not happen. And that's Marty Necas
Yep.
from Carolina. So that's someone that certainly is looking to get moved. I think we'd be shocked if he wasn't traded by the end of this offseason. We talked about him, what was it, a couple episodes ago?
Mm-hmm.
About potential targets. It was him and Nikolai Ehlers that we kind of gave our opinions about whether or not the Kraken should trade for them. And I think we both came down on the side of that it didn't make sense for the Kraken to trade for Necas. But since then, there have been reports, I think it was NHL Network, that reported the asking price that the Hurricanes want for him, but also I think it was Pagnotta too. He's been all over the Kraken stuff, who linked the Kraken to Necas and said that they have called and asked about him. So we know the Kraken are at least somewhat interested enough to make a call.
Mm-hmm.
And we kind of have a better idea on what the return the Canes are looking for is. Now, Dylan, what are they looking for in a Marty Necas trade?
The Canes or the Kraken?
The Canes.
Oh, I don't have that still from 2 weeks ago. All
right.
Well, they want a star level return is what they had said. Like they view him like a potential star and they want a star level return. So you're thinking high picks prospects, but also like an NHL ready guy because they're very much in their window. Like they want NHL players. How? I don't know how they've come to this valuation. I still don't know how his tires have been pumped up so massively. I'm looking at his page again. I'm trying to see where it is, like what the thing is. I don't get it, RJ. I don't see how this is a $7.5 million player. I don't see how this is a budding superstar who just needs his big break. I don't get any of this around this guy. All I can say is whoever represents him, bravo. If I'm a prospect this year in the draft, I'm seeking out whatever agency represents him because this has been an unbelievable amount of talk around a completely above average but nothing more player.
Yeah, and so by the way, agent Michael Deutsch, let's shout him out there.
Yeah.
Because impressive stuff. But yeah, the narrative is that Necas hasn't fit the Carolina Hurricanes style of play, I guess.
Yeah.
And that he would benefit from a change of scenery in a different system that's kind of more rush oriented because he's a skilled player. He's got good puck skills. He's good on the rush. And the Canes don't always play that way. They like to, kind of spray a lot of point shots and go and get rebounds. They put lots of pucks in the net, and maybe that doesn't fit his game the best. And that the idea is that he is a breakout player waiting to happen. And that if you can just put him in a better system, he's ready to be that legit first liner. I don't see it.
Yeah.
But maybe some people do. And I just don't think also depending on the system for Dan Bilesman and everything, maybe it's a little more beneficial. But also I go to this tweet from JFresh that I wanted to pull up from at JFresh Hockey, right? He said, I see an awful lot of the Canes are misusing Necas and they need to let him cook, which is weird to me because they very much do let him cook. Like he does not play dump and chase, bang, bang Canes hockey. And he posted a graph here of 5-on-5 rush offense versus cycle forecheck offense. And of all the Canes players, he's out there to the right here on as far as rush offense. So while the rest of the team may play a different way, but when he's out on the ice, it's pretty rush slanted and it is kind of geared toward the things that he does well. And that JFresh actually followed up with, maybe he just isn't a star.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where I'm at. I think maybe he just isn't a star player. And so with the Canes looking for a star player valuation kind of coming back in a deal. And of course, it's your job to ask for a lot.
Yep.
Right? You don't want to ask for, for just a middling player. This guy's not actually that good. You want to kind of inflate the price. But with them asking for a star coming back in return, I just don't see how it could possibly make sense for the Kraken, not just as far as the value that they'd be giving up, but as far as a fit, because the other report is that the Canes want NHL ready players, and that makes sense. They're right in the middle of their window. They're ready to win now. And so they want somebody who can help them right away. And when you look at what the Kraken might have to offer, I don't know where the fit is, because the big asset they have, of course, is the 8th overall pick this year. But I don't think the Canes are interested in futures like that. Even then, I think it's too high a value to give up for a player like that.
Mm-hmm.
But still, they have draft picks. They have prospects. They have like a Jagger Furcus. They have Carson Rakoff. They have guys like that, but those guys aren't ready to help the Canes win right now.
Mm-mm.
So that's not a fit. And then you look at, okay, what NHL ready players do the Kraken have? In the first place I look is defense, because Carolina's got a situation on their blue line. And this is why I think they might be looking for a young defender who's has some term or some team control, because Pesce and Shea are up. Their contracts are up. Their UFAs. And then they have Orlov, Slavin, and Burns. Basically, the rest of their entire blue line just has 1 year left on their contracts, and they're all over 30.
Mm-hmm.
So they are going to need to pretty much completely rebuild this blue line at some point. So if the Kraken had, I guess the one guy they do have that kind of fits that is Riker Evans.
Yeah.
But can the Kraken in their position with their blue line, also needing to rebuild it soon, really afford to give up Riker Evans? I don't think they can.
No, especially when it's not like you have anybody else really in your pipeline along the blue line.
That's it.
Like it's Riker Evans. It's like maybe Caden Price, Ty Nelson at some point, but like
they're years away.
That's it. Yeah.
So I think the Kraken can't really afford to do that. So I don't see a fit there. And if you look at the forwards, I don't think the whole point of like what we're looking at in the offseason is the Kraken don't have star level forwards. If that's the valuation the Canes want, if you look a tier down, they have some guys, I guess. Mm-hmm. Like Jared McCann is someone that you brought up to me as maybe who they would look for. And I think that would be a great deal for Carolina.
Carolina, yeah, it'd be ridiculous. Like you'd be talking about like sending Oliver Bjorkstrand or something, right? Like that's like the fit that would work. But then you're sending a 59-point player for what, a 57-point player? 53-point
who's going to be
player?
More expensive?
Who's going to be more expensive? Like, why would you do that? Like, it makes no sense. Here's the only reason I think any of this is possible, RJ, is because if there's whenever these situations arise, if there ever is going to be a general manager that will meet the asking price because they do believe in the player above what the player's production has been, it's the general manager who drafted him. Which is a good point. Ron Francis, who drafted him 12th overall. So obviously at a point in time, Ron Francis did believe that this was a star player. And so if there was one player who was going to talk with him or whatever and come to a point where they were like, yeah, you know what? No, I still think this player could be a star player and he is being misused. And if he comes here, we can do it right. It would be Ron Francis. Just because that's the scenario, and we've seen that happen in the past, where general managers move on to a different team and they overpay to bring in some of the guys that they drafted with the previous team, and that scares me, RJ. That really, really scares me because that's why I could see this actually maybe potentially happening. Because otherwise, it makes no sense.
Yeah, I was gonna say, don't scare me, Dylan. I guess on the flip side of that is if you look at kind of Ron Francis's MO as a GM, Nate just would be the best player that he has ever traded for.
Yes.
I think the current best player he's ever traded for, what, Bjorkstrand?
Probably.
I think.
Yeah. He doesn't trade for guys. He trades away a lot of guys at deadlines. He doesn't trade for players.
Right. And that's the thing. We saw the Nature's Carolina, Seattle rumors, right? And I saw some Canes fans commenting on it, like, this isn't actually serious or going to happen because that would involve Ron Francis trading for an NHL player. Yeah. And of course, that's a bit of exaggeration there. But it would be, given what the return would have to be, I think it would be an unprecedented trade for him.
Yeah.
But I'm with you, though. If there was a trade where he would kind of step up and give up more than he's used to, it would be for a guy that he drafted 12th overall.
Mm-hmm. So that freaks me out a little bit, not gonna lie. Can only hope that either the asking price isn't that bad or that Ron Francis understands that he's just not in a place to do this. Because again, on top of it, you gotta pay him. Like, not only are you, like, just go out in free agency and pay somebody. Why give up significant assets and then pay somebody for second line production when you're already a team full of second line production? I just don't.
I don't mind. Yeah, in general, I don't mind the idea of acquiring an RFA and paying them. like that's fine with me. And maybe it is just that I don't really believe the player is going to be a star. But because that concept I don't really mind. I think there's success to be had, and I might rather they do that than go sign a UFA. I think it's just the specific player for me anyway.
Yeah, but I mean, normally when you're talking about acquiring a RFA, you're not talking about the other team wanting a star level return.
That's true. Yeah, and you're usually talking about someone a little younger. I mean, H is 25,
right? Like
versus a UFA could be as young as 27.
Yeah. So like again, would you rather give up an asset and pay Nietzsche's 7.5 RJ, or give up a middle round pick and try to play Jake Gensel 9?
Yeah, I mean, I would certainly go Gensel over Natchez.
Yeah,
for that, given the return that would be necessary, absolutely.
Because like
in terms of
both
assets.
of those options are on the table right now. If you're making a deal with Carolina, you give up a third round pick and get the rights to negotiate for 3 weeks with Jake Gensel and pay him, or you could go and give up a bunch of assets and bring in and then also have to pay a bunch to Nietzsche, who's significantly worse from a production standpoint. Right? Like Jake Gensel,
for me, it's not even close. If you think you can sign Gensel, of course.
Yeah. Like Jake Gensel he was an assist per game player with Carolina, the same team Nicias is on, and couldn't be a point per game player. Like, and
the systems, Dylan.
I just don't get it. I don't get it. And also, Carolina's system should not be working for Jake Gensel either. Right? If you're using the whole like, oh, he's been held down by the system argument. What? Jake Gensel wasn't? Like, is Jake Gensel a dump and chase kind of player, RJ? I don't think of him as that. So I don't know. The whole thing doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, so we'll see how it plays out. I mean, weren't there some rumors that Natchez could have been moved before Game 1 of the Cup final? Like, It seems like the Canes actually could make a deal here before the offseason really gets in full swing.
Yeah, well, and if you're them and you are looking at maybe draft pick return, you would want to do that before the draft. But I don't know. This feels like maybe it gets done right before the draft when all the general managers are around, right? When they're all having their meetings, when they're all there in person at one singular location. That feels like the time we might actually see something go down.
Yeah, I feel like when the trade goes down for Natchez, I feel like we'll be able to react with each other in person in Vegas.
Yes, I agree with that. Also, do you know what one of his nicknames is according to Hockey Reference?
No.
Because maybe this changes your mind on everything.
Okay, well, tell me. It'd have to be pretty good.
Sugar Boo. Want to trade for Sugar Boo, RJ?
Why? I don't. Do I want to know why? I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know either. But it's there. It's obviously significant enough that it made it to Hockey Reference. So, any Carolina fans watching want to let us know? Please.
Yes, please do. Or don't. I don't know.
I don't know. Definitely don't do it in a late night DM.
I guess it's something that a quick search. Andrei Svechnikov called him that. I guess.
That I believe. I believe that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's fine.
That's fine.
That's just funny.
All right. I think that's going to do it.
All right. Real quick.
Okay.
In the video where he calls him that, Morgan Geekie is standing there prominently. So
there we go. Hey, I mean, maybe that's something against my whole Ron Francis will do it just to bring in a player he drafted high, because Ron Francis let Morgan Geekie go. Not to reopen that wound for everybody, but
I know. Yeah. Are we going to really end the podcast on this much of a downer?
Nobody's still listening. It's fine.
Fair enough.
All right, everybody. Thanks so much for listening. Thanks so much for joining us. Thanks so much to Queen Anne Beer Hall for sponsoring this podcast. Hope to see everybody at patreon.com/EmeraldCityHockey later tonight for Game 2 of the Stanley Cup Finals. And please go check out Gersby at that awesome show on Saturday. That should be fun. I was going to see if you were going to add to that, but...
Oh, no. Well, if you want... No, seriously. Edinburgh is awesome, too. Like, I've been wanting to go to the Edinburgh Fringe for a while. I didn't... Like, people don't want to hear about, like, me wanting to go to the show and everything. I was in Edinburgh, like, several years ago. Missed the Fringe by, like, 2 weeks. but it looks so awesome. It's going to be a great time. It's going to be a great show. She is very funny.
Yes.
Also, like if you've talked to her on the Discord, if you've met her in person, very, very funny. You will laugh. The Pig War is also just a really interesting. Like, go read the Wikipedia page for the Pig War.
Here we go. I got RJ started. My bad, everybody.
Okay, yeah. Don't get me started on history things because I will not stop. So,
yeah.
But anyway, go check it out. It's gonna be a great show. Thanks again to Gaby for reaching out to us about all this, and yeah, check it out.
Yep. All right, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Hey everyone, before we go, we just wanted to give a quick shout out to all of our awesome patrons over at patreon.com/Emerald City Hockey, especially our Terror of the Deep patrons.
Thank you so much for making all this possible. We really appreciate your support.